Hello everybody, I'm Dr. Joseph Baker from the Limerick Chiropractic Center, and we're going to be talking tonight about sitting is the new smoking. Now, probably some of you are wondering right about now where this conversation is going to go. Let me tell you, there's no props involved tonight. I'm not standing here with a cigarette, chilling out on a lounge chair, all right? We are going to dive into this conversation. In fact, before we even bring up the very first slide, I'm going to ask you to do one thing for me. Right now, I want you to type in how many hours a day you believe you sit. Now, I'm going to pause. I want to wait for just a second because I want you to put that answer in. Because I'm going to have a homework assignment for you. I'm going to have you going back and watching and reviewing this and counting also. Counting the number of hours. You're going to do your own audit to figure out if what you thought you were doing and what you're actually doing are the same thing. Because let me tell you, just like smoking, and I've watched people. I used to have an aunt, and God bless, I would watch her, and she'd sit there smoking, and one cigarette after the next. And it was that chain reaction where all of a sudden, as one was going down, the other one's getting lit up, and next thing you know, the pack is gone. Next thing you know, she's into another pack. And here's the thing. Likewise, with our sitting, it's the same exact thing. We forget. Unless we're timing ourselves, unless we're looking at what we're doing, we are not even realizing how big of a problem we have. And if some of you are really wondering, is it that big of a deal? The answer is absolutely yes. Because let me tell you, sitting takes up for most individuals more than half of their waking hours. Now you just have to settle in and recognize that, when you sleep, it's normally 8 hours, all right? When you're awake, those other hours of the day, half of those, so another 8 hours, you could be sitting there and causing your body to unfortunately have a level of breakdown that is slow, it's insidious, but eventually produces a crisis for you. And it's not okay. And my job tonight is to raise a level of awareness so that you start to recognizing how big of a mountain you're building that you have to start to take down. And I love the fact that in our offices, so many of you have learned, we talk about ergonomics, we talk about, how to make something that we're doing less bad. Well, tonight, you're going to learn a little bit about why is this so bad. And that this is not necessarily a chiropractic thing. This is one of those things that we recognize is just like and just as bad as having a heart attack. Because most people who sit all day long, they're at a greater risk of having a heart attack, same as smoking. It increases the likelihood. In fact, there's this little group out there, it's called the Mayo Clinic. In fact, the cardiologists have done the research on this, where if you have a job that requires you to sit, you're a third more likely to have a cardiovascular incident. Now, I don't care how you want to define cardiovascular incident, heart attack, stroke, it doesn't matter. None of those things are good and healthy for the body. In fact, they only cause our body to break down. Now, we need to agree on that because if not, the rest of this conversation doesn't make any sense. Crisis for our circulatory system is a bad thing. And we need to make sure that we're reducing the risk. And yet, if we're sitting, we are naturally increasing the risk. And that is something that the cardiologists determined a long, long time ago. The amazing thing is that none of this is new news. In fact, it's also been demonstrated that prolonged sitting, or reclining can actually tamper your glucose levels and your metabolism rate. Now, I'm not going to ask you for a raise of hands or for you to hit the like button, but how many of you out there right now, as you're listening to this, and you start thinking of, well, I probably sit more than I'm supposed to, and you start looking in the mirror and you recognize, well, I'm carrying a few extra pounds, or my A1C1 level is higher than it's supposed to be. Maybe you're pre-diabetic. Maybe you have type 2 diabetes. I don't know. But it's something for you to think about. It's something for you to reflect on. In fact, you might know somebody who falls in this profile that you want to share this information with. And because of that, I'm going to encourage you that, hey, listen, you want to do this in the most kind way. You want to just simply say, hey, listen, you're going to like this video. You'll leave a comment about your takeaway, which will allow somebody else to look into it to see what your takeaway was. But then make sure that you share it in your own Facebook group so that this information gets put out there so that others can at least learn of some of those concerns, so that you're able to very much simply and easily raise a level of awareness that might not necessarily be taken real well if it's confronted directly. So, as we know, excessive sitting, it gradually shortens the hip flexor muscles. Now, if you're not familiar with what those are, they're these deep, deep muscles that actually lay right along the front of your spine. Note, they attach into the spine. So when you're sitting, when you're doing this, it shortens these muscles. And let me tell you, muscles get trained. If you don't constantly stretch them out, if you don't open things up, what happens is they'll continue to want to shorten. Now, here's the problem. When they get shortened, they tug on the two ends that they attach to, not only in the leg, but also in your low back, which means eventually it's going to create an imbalance. It's going to pull you out of a normal position. In fact, the sad thing is that as soon as we go into a seated position, instead of having the nice curve that you're supposed to have in your low back, what happens? It straightens out. You know, if we look to nature for the answer of whether it's a good thing or beneficial thing for us to be sitting for any length of time, all we have to do is look at what the body does. You lose the curve, let me think. Arthritis happens, the disc stops getting pumped and fed the way it's supposed to because things are not moving properly. Oh yeah, by the way, instead of everything being balanced weight-wise front to back, all of a sudden you have all of that weight and pressure building up right here in your hips at the base of your low back because it's not getting transferred all the way down to the ground the way it's supposed to. We could probably stop this conversation now. Is sitting the new smoking? The answer is absolutely yes, it is. But there's more to the story. In fact, you know, it's known, we were designed as humans that we are supposed to be upright and moving. And in turn, you know, those biomechanics, those different changes that happen when we sit, it demonstrates over a long period of time how slowly it erodes the body and wears it away. And the problem is that unfortunately, on top of everything else, sometimes we don't necessarily see all the bad stuff until it's too late. You know, like when we have weakened the system so much that it causes us to have less and less strength in our legs, which causes us to be more of that fall risk. Now, I'm pretty sure that none of you out there, as you're watching this, and as you sign up to have a particular job and you're sitting there in front of a computer, think, well, hey, listen, down the road, I'm going to become a fall risk and I'm going to break my hips. None of us think that way. And yet, research has demonstrated, and the outcome studies are there, that point to the fact that that's exactly what happens. We don't need to do more research. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We know what the outcome is going to be. Our choice is, you know what, like anything else, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do in order to make sure that we're not one of those statistics? That we are making sure that we're breaking free from that sitting position, that we're creating those breaks so that we can decrease the risk of things like heart disease and diabetes and strokes. So that in the end, we don't have to be one of those statistics that's out there. So, like anything, it's not that hard. In fact, the Canadian, the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada, they recommend that at least you get up and you do 30 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity throughout the course of the week. In fact, they're recommending about 5 days a week. Now, 30 minutes, 5 days a week. Is it that hard? Shake your head no. No, it's not. But you know what? It has to be intentional. Because how many of us think about things and then our day gets going and all of a sudden we're 9 o'clock at night and we're saying, where did the day go? Last month we talked about, our positioning in our day. If you hadn't seen the conversation about day one, you want to go back and listen to that conversation. Because it helps to make sure that you put the right things in the beginning part of your day to lead you to that greatest amount of success. So, what can you do to make sure that you don't get into that new smoking program that we call sitting? Well, listen, you want to create a schedule. You need to make sure that you're getting breaks during the course of the day, get up, get moving. You want to make sure that you're out there walking. You want to make sure that you're parking farther away just to increase the distance, the number of steps that you're taking to offset the amount of sitting that you're going to be doing. In fact, really big thing is that since we know that some of your jobs require you to sit, let's make sure that we're doing an ergonomics workstation check. Because here's the thing, if we can make it less bad, it's going to have less of a negative effect on your system. And as a chiropractor, we recognize one of the biggest things that we do for our patients is to make sure that we get people checked in order to help to understand how their body is functioning before they get to a crisis. Because like anything else, finding a little problem is so much easier to address than once we get into crisis. That's not okay. In fact, like anything else chiropractically, we talk about the fact that, if we're not correcting the root cause of the problem itself, we're not doing our job. So listen, like we started out this conversation, I want you to do one thing. I wanted you to, in the beginning of this conversation, to write down that number. How many hours a day do you think you're sitting? At this point, what I want you to do is I want you to start counting. I want you to start thinking tomorrow, okay, so how many hours did I sit? And start accumulating those times. And I want you to come back and I want you to look at your answer so you can reflect on reality. Are you doing better than you thought you were? Are you actually on track for what you thought you were doing? Or are you woefully underestimating how big of a problem you actually have? Either way, if you need help making sure that you're creating a better scenario for your body in regards to sitting, ask. The wonderful thing is we teach people how to sit all the time. The wonderful thing is that we teach people how to, have ergonomic workstation checks performed all the time. And for many of you, we've done them here in the office. We've also visited on site in order to make sure that workstations get set up properly so that we make that sitting less bad. I'm Dr. Joseph Baker from the Limerick Chiropractic Center.